Good evening, everybody. It is Thursday night in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My name is Adam Bittner, Assistant Sports Editor for Multimedia at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Joined for our Steelers postgame show by Paul Zeise of the Post-Gazette after a 25-8 or 19 Steelers loss to the Browns up in Cleveland. It was a snowy night. I think it was a poorly coached game, Paul. I think it was a poorly played game. And there's a lot to digest in this one for us to get into. So what are your thoughts here right off the top?
I mean, to your point, it was a really poorly coached and played game by the Steelers. The only reason it was close is because the Browns can't get out of their own way. I mean, the Steelers almost were able to steal this game. And make no mistake, the way they played, they deserved to lose. But the Browns are just a self-destructive team and usually find ways to lose that game. And that being said, I don't really understand what the Steelers' game plan was tonight. So you're going to have to explain it to me, Adam, because there were so many things that I just wondered. Are they really trying to win this game or what? And so for conspiracy theorists out there, like I pointed out on the chat, 90% of the money was on the Steelers in this game, and 75% of it was on under. So it was the Browns and over that actually hit, which means Vegas is very happy tonight.
Yeah, you always got to look for that value when the numbers are that stacked. Paul, we're going to get into all of it. The quarterback decisions, the fourth down decisions, the timeout use, clock management, all of that. Before we do, just want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. There's no better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year-round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started planning on your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. Paul, I'm going to ask the first question this way because this is inevitably how it will be broken down during the week. Was this a quote-unquote Tomlin game? Sometimes it's shifting definitions. But look, you go up there, you're a heavy favorite. 90% of the money's on you. The Browns have looked listless for wide swaths of the season. And it wasn't just a matter of you got outplayed and they played a good game. I don't think anyone's looking at the way the Browns played tonight and says, wow, they went out and won the game. I think you feel like the Steelers lost the game. So was this a Tomlin game?
I mean, by the definition of what we've come to know the Tomlin game to be, I guess it is. But I have a hard time in a rivalry kind of, division game against the Browns. Putting it on that, I really think Mike Tomlin just had a really bad game. I mean, I thought Arthur Smith wasn't much better. The defense did what they do, but for the most part, the Browns had a lot of good field position because of the stupid decisions they were making on offense. The Steelers were making on offense. So, if you're asking me, do I think Mike Tomlin did not have his best night? Yeah, absolutely. I think he didn't have a very good night at all. If you're asking me, if this is a typical game where the Steelers just sort of sleptwalked, I don't think that's the case. I think they just played poorly.
Yeah, I think that way as well. But I guess let's start with the quarterback use. I think if you look at Russell Wilson statistically, 21 and 28, 270 yards, the touchdown, passer rating of 116.7, 9.6 yards per attempt. You say, wow, the Steelers must have won the game. But he also has the 4 sacks for 22 yards. And it wasn't just the 4 sacks. It was situationally they killed drives. He was definitely holding on to the ball too long in a few of those circumstances. Such that you feel the need to play Justin Fields rather extensively. I'm looking here, three rushes, had the pass, was in on a couple other plays that got, canceled out by penalties. He had a decent chunk of that one drive there in the second half. What did you think of the way Arthur Smith was mixing both guys into the game after a lot of talk about that all week?
Adam, I think that the Justin Fields package, or whatever we're going to call that, it needs to be used very, 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 very far and few between. For one thing, I think it disrupts the flow of the offense a little bit. And I know he had the 35-yard run down the sideline. Wonderful. That drive, that touchdown was aided and abetted by, the Browns getting a roughing the passer penalty, then the Browns getting a taunting penalty or whatever it was down around the goal line. And then on 3rd and 8, a little bit earlier than that, the jumping off sides. And I thought, if I'm not mistaken, right before the shanked punt, was it that drive that they brought in Justin Fields and thought they were going to trick the Browns by having him throw a jump ball down the field on 3rd down as opposed to trying to just get the first down? I think they got too cute with it, Adam. I think they tried to outthink themselves. And I think that really, going forward, I don't have a problem with them using him a little bit, but they've got to be a little bit smarter. And they've got to be a little bit less smartest guy in the room syndrome when it comes to using him. 3rd and 3 or 4 with a chance to, really put the Browns in a bad situation is not the time to bring him in and think you're going to fool him and hope that he can throw a jump ball down the field. I just thought that, it was – I don't have a problem with them using him a little bit. I just thought tonight they tried a little too hard to get too cute.
Well, and here's my thing is that they were clearly designed runs for Fields, and in a couple of those circumstances, I think of the 4th and 2 play early in the game, you kind of knew he was going to run the ball, and they weren't seriously considering throwing the ball with Justin Fields. And I think the package loses its credibility with defenses if you kind of know where the ball is going. And I felt like it was a little predictable in the way they used him and that they weren't going to let him throw the ball. And then, of course, they try to trick him on that last play late.
Right.
But they, he just did not seem like they were going to let him throw and that they weren't going to let a Justin Fields mistake lose them the game. And so I think it loses credibility and is less effective. I think of, I host our Penn State podcast, and the way Penn State uses Bo Prabula brought him in that Wisconsin game. He came in and threw it when Wisconsin wasn't expecting him. He was very effective. They let their guy who is brought in for the athletic package just throw the ball a little bit. And I just didn't get the vibe that's the way they were going to use Justin Fields tonight.
No, I feel like, to be honest, again, I'm not opposed to a little package of plays for Justin Fields. I feel like he's a weapon you can use and utilize and get some good things from him. But I thought tonight it was all over the place. It was kind of a disaster. It was, they didn't really have a good idea of what they wanted to do with him. And I thought that was a problem. I'll tell you the other thing, given the conditions, I have no idea why they didn't let Jaylen Warren just be the back. And he was running faster. He was getting downhill. It seemed like Najee Harris was stuck in the snow the entire night. He had maybe 1 or 2 little runs, but that was another part of it that I felt like when you put Justin Fields and Jaylen Warren in there, then all of a sudden you've got really something in terms of 2 guys that the defense has to worry about. But they've got to figure out what they're going to do with Justin Fields, because they can't do this kind of stuff and expect it to work. They just can't.
While we're on the topic of the running backs, Paul, I think this is the second or third game in a row now where Jaylen Warren has been way more efficient than Najee Harris, coming right off what I think was the best stretch of Najee Harris's career. I wrote this down, and I don't know if it's the top of mind thought for a lot of people tonight, but it feels to me like maybe Najee needs more volume, and that trying to have him split carries with Jaylen Warren is not productive for him, and that he's gotten better in the fourth quarter of these games when he didn't have Jaylen Warren backstopping him. How do you feel about the way they're using these guys and how Jaylen Warren's healthy return almost directly coincides with Najee Harris losing the momentum that he had built up?
Well, that's been Najee Harris's career, though. He usually follows a few really good games with a couple of just sort of mediocre games. That's been his career. I mean, Adam, I think the one thing we've seen with Najee Harris is at his best, he's an effective, meat meat and potatoes, grind it out kind of running back for your team. He can have some big games where, he's getting 6, 7, 8 yards, a carry, and all that other stuff. But he can also have games like tonight where he averages 2 yards a carry and just doesn't look very effective. And every time he, has a game like that, we always seem to be searching for some reason other than the fact that he's just sort of okay. I just don't think he's great. I don't think he's a great player. I don't think he's an elite running back. And, I think to me, the thing about Jaylen Warren is he always runs hard. He always gets to the hole fast. He's so much more, like you said, efficient. I don't know. I would have used him more tonight in the snow than Najee Harris.
Yeah, and I just wonder, man, if Najee's getting 20 plus carries a game, is that where he is at his best? I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I'm just noticing that the statistical trends tell very different stories of when it's just Najee Harris in the backfield versus when he's sharing it with Jaylen Warren. Paul, I know a lot of people are just going to want to get straight to the Tomlin conversation, so I think all over the place tonight. I think even just in the first half, I think you could argue the game was won and lost in the first half with just the decisions he made. Elects to kick the 58-yard field goal on the first drive. Second drive, they're at 55 yards. You go for it on 4th and 2 with what I felt was a fairly telegraphed play call with Justin Fields. Then at the end of the half, you have 7 seconds left. I believe they had the ball on the 40 or 41. They had a timeout left, and they just choose to go to the locker room and not even attempt, a long field goal that you had decided to do on the first play of the game. I mean –
and then how about how he managed the end of the game?
Well, I want to get to that.
And his use of timeouts and the fact that he wasted timeouts, and then the whole nonsense with, not taking the penalty, then not taking the penalty, then taking it again, and then it doesn't matter because Jameis Winston throws a 20-yard pass or whatever it is down the field. I really, when I look at the whole big picture, I understand wanting to get your ball back, wanting to get the ball back too, but I don't like – it felt like the Steelers let Chubb score there so they could get the ball back with a minute and, have a chance to win.
But then why not let him score on the previous play?
Exactly. Well, I think it looked like they were trying to. But my feeling was the Browns still had to kick a field goal in that condition. I don't care if it was a 20-yarder, a 30-yarder, or a 40-yarder. I would have done everything in my power to make them kick the field goal. And so I didn't like – I thought, they went for it another time, didn't they? A 4th down, somewhere around midfield, and they didn't make it. When I thought that the play was probably to punt, the field goal, the 50
drive of the second. It was the first drive of the second half. They had, what was it? 4th and 1 on the, and they gave it to Warren, lost a yard. And that was, they were in plus territory at that point.
I really thought that, the 58-yard field goal was just asinine. In those conditions with the wind swirling and everything else and the snow and all that stuff, I just didn't understand why do that. Why, Boswell is who he is, but it would have been like his second longest field goal ever, and you chose those conditions to kick the field goal. I didn't like that at all.
Yeah, just lots of questionable decisions from him tonight, and I think they piled up. A lot of times it's 1 or 2 decisions that you're talking about. Tonight, I think you really can go through the whole game and questionable decisions, and it's kind of like the conditions sometimes work coaches' brains a little bit, and it's because I don't think the Browns wanted to kick either. I think that weighed into the penalty call and that drama there. Late in the game, where it seemed like, once the Browns kind of declared that they were going to go for it on 4th and 2, then he says, okay, we'll make it 3rd and 7 again and make them make 2 plays and then have to kick it from the 47.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the right choice or not. Let's get into the play calling a little bit. Paul, what did you think of the game that Arthur Smith called tonight? There's been a lot of criticism. I mean, listen, they did move the ball. I mean, and it's just every time between the 20s, they look great. And then things just bog down, and it seems like it gets too hard for them.
Well, I know this. I could live without seeing Najee Harris toss sweeps for the rest of my life and be okay with it. They had the jet sweep to Cordell Patterson down around the goal line, and he lost a couple of yards. And then, of course, the Browns got the penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. I didn't think that the play calling was horrible. I thought they tried to manage the conditions, right, and tried to make sure that they managed the conditions the correct way. They had opportunities. I didn't even think Russell Wilson played all that poorly. I mean, he missed a couple throws. They always miss a couple of throws. I felt like the game plan didn't make a lot of sense. And I thought that early on, as you said, they set the tone in a bad way by missing a field goal that they probably should have punted on, probably should have punted the next time they had the ball as well. I just felt like, they let the Browns sort of hang around. And for all of his goofiness, right, Jameis Winston is a guy who, within the same game can look like the worst quarterback that's ever played in the NFL and the best quarterback. So you keep giving him opportunities, and of course you knew he was going to have a breakthrough. So to me, I look at this game, and I just say I don't think anybody on that was in white and on the white sidelines tonight had a good game. I just don't. I don't feel like this. They didn't spend. Their special teams weren't good tonight. Usually their special teams are pretty good. Weren't good tonight. I thought their offense was inconsistent, sputtered a little bit. And, of course, the defense, sprung some leaks. So it was, people want to get on Arthur Smith. I get it. I blame Mike Tomlin more than Arthur Smith.
Yeah, because ultimately they were the big decisions that I think weighed in this game. I tend to agree with you there, Paul, more than any individual play call. I do want to get into Jameis Winston and the way the Steelers played defensively in a little bit, because I think I don't want to underplay that aspect of the Steelers losing. It was a rough night for the secondary. Just a couple more questions on offense. I think the number one is what is so complicated about the Steelers offense that we've not seen Mike Williams now in 2 weeks do anything?
Yeah, a lot of people believe me. I do the chat, during the game, I do the chat. A lot of people kept bringing up the fact that he was not playing. He was not in the game. He was not given opportunities. I don't know. Maybe he's not in shape. Maybe, who knows what the issue is. I have a hard time believing that it's that he can't learn, 8 to 10 routes that he could run in a game. I don't think that is all it. I mean, maybe, it could be as much as Mike Tomlin sees Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson as guys that he likes more than Mike Williams right now. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, and maybe he's just, like I said, just not in shape. I don't know, but I would like to see him a little bit more, just because I think he could help them.
Yeah, to Calvin Austin's credit, Paul, I mean, he's starting to put some games together. I think tonight is on that list with the touchdown catch. He is the Steelers' leading receiver tonight. I don't know how many times you've said that about Calvin Austin. 3 catches for the 78 yards, the touchdown, beating out George Pickens with his 4 catches for 48. So Calvin Austin needs to work on the consistency, but at least I can see what they're going for with him. I think with the Van Jefferson, I'm like, what do you do, and why are those guys not splitting, a few more snaps? But I guess we'll see. They got 10 days here to get him more integrated. If we don't see him a little bit more against the Bengals, I think people are going to start asking questions. Because this is a rental type of trade, right? You gave up a draft pick to go get this guy. Are you going to use him? You only have so many games to do it. We're 3 games in here, and you've got the one big play, and that's about it. Paul, lots of complaints about. Oh, go ahead.
I'll give you one other thing. How about the play call on the 2-point conversion when you're trying to take a 3-point lead? You throw a fade to Cordell Patterson. What in the hell is that? I mean, there's probably about 7 other guys I'd rather throw a fade to on that offense than Cordell Patterson or however you say his first name. The bottom line is
throw that one to Justin Fields.
What?
I said throw that one to Justin Fields.
Yeah, or Mount Washington or Pat Fryermuth or Pickens or somebody, right? Why are you throwing it to Patterson? That was just another in a long list of silly things that happened in this game.
Paul, lots of complaints about the holding tonight. We know the pass rush did not get home on Jameis Winston too much. They finished with the 1 sack. There were times that they were close, Paul, but they did not get home nearly enough. Was that on the Steelers in your mind and the pass rush, or was that on somewhat the officiating in this game? Because I felt like they were kind of letting the holds go both ways.
Yeah, I think part of it, honestly, is, I don't know how well the officials could see this, some of the things they were trying to look at with all the snow flying and everything. I had a hard time watching the game. I can't imagine, that it was easy to see penalties. And I thought that there were some penalties that, they just couldn't see. But listen, Herbig made the big play. Obviously, they got home there, but TJ Watt was pretty invisible in this game tonight, and that's part of, I thought Minkah Fitzpatrick was pretty invisible in this game tonight. The Steelers didn't cover particularly well, and because they didn't cover particularly well, they didn't give those guys up front that extra half second or second to get to get home. So, you expect, when you are the Steelers, you expect to be the team that dominates your defensive front. If nothing else, you expect your defensive front to dominate the game. And they just didn't do it tonight. Part of it could be that, the conditions, maybe they weren't, but the other team played in the conditions too. So I just thought it was a bad night at the office for just about everybody out there.
Paul, we're going to dig into the defense a little bit more. Before we do, just want to thank another couple sponsors here. The game is always on at Archie's on Carson, Pittsburgh's best place for food, drinks, and sports. Open Sundays for the game, 12 p.m. to 2 a.m. Be sure to check out their daily drink specials and stop in for 80-cent wig nights Monday through Thursday. Tell them that Paul Zeise sent you. Paul, you are going to hang out there on Monday night this week?
Yeah, I'll be there.
All right, and we also want to thank Goldberg, Persky & White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky & White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. Paul, to your point about Jameis Winston, I think a lot of people perceive him to be a joke. It's partly because of just the way he presents himself publicly, a lot of goofy comments. I think we saw one tonight before the game with Kaylee Hartung on the Amazon broadcast where he was referring to the horses ready for war, all that stuff. I think a lot of people think he's a joke, but if you look at what he's done since he's coming from Deshaun Watson, he can move the ball. And I think that's what we saw tonight is he is capable. I don't think this is like when they go in there and they lose to a terrible backup quarterback. I think this is a guy who's a gunslinger and teams believe they can't win with him as their starter because he makes too many mistakes, throws too many interceptions, but he still has the talent to move the ball.
He's let's see. I think he's played in 5 games for them? And he's thrown for 1,047 yards, 61% completion percentage, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So, to your point, I think the thing about it is, yes, he's a little bit of a goofball. He says funny things. His interviews are legendary. I'll say this. It really seems like if you watched any of the highlights of the Browns versus the Saints last week, every guy just about on that Saints team, gave him a big hug and, shook his hand and everything else. He seems to be a guy that everyone likes in their locker room. He seems to be a guy that's a good teammate. And as I've said many times this week, the beautiful thing about Jameis Winston and what makes him, in my mind, the most exciting player in the NFL is that he keeps both teams in every single game he plays. And he's also a guy who at times you think he's playing for both teams. But you see the feast and the famine from him, and sometimes within the same game. And, to me, his last 3 or 4 games were better than anything Deshaun Watson did when he was in a Browns uniform. So he does give them a chance to win, at least, because he can move the ball. But again, he's sort of just a guy that also gives them a chance to lose because he's going to put a lot of balls in play. And, we saw that tonight with a couple of, he could have thrown a couple more interceptions even than just the one he did.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not to say I think, Jameis Winston's any great shakes. It's just he's not a guy that I think you can take lightly, and I think we saw that tonight, and that was part of what went on here is that he has the ability to do some things. He's not the joke that Deshaun Watson was for much of the season, and that's a big key to why things went the way they did. Paul, do you think I watched Patrick Queen play, and a lot of just the way he's around the ball, the way he's making more and more plays, and the way he is noticeable in these games. And I've seen people in the comments already saying, "Where's Minkah Fitzpatrick?" Is Patrick Queen playing the way people wish Minkah played?
Yeah, in some ways. Patrick Queen is flying around the field and making plays. He's showing up and making high-impact plays. And so I think when you look at it from that standpoint, it really is, in so many ways, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Befuddling that Minkah Fitzpatrick disappears for whole quarters and 2 quarters and sometimes even 3 quarters. I mean, he does make a few impact plays here and there, but he's got to get back to a point where he's making plays and showing up, and doing things that they're paying him to do. He doesn't do that enough.
Paul, anyone in that secondary that did not impress you tonight? Because obviously, just a lot of big plays given up at inopportune times, move the chains. Things like that. Who were you looking at in that secondary beyond Minkah Fitzpatrick that's just, didn't cut it for you tonight?
Well, let me ask you a question because you're a Penn Stater, so I can ask you this. Do you think Joey Porter's had a really particularly great season?
No, I certainly don't.
I look at him and I'm a little concerned. I think that teams have sort of figured out his, physicality and that, grab it and he's making some plays at the point of attack because he's a physical player, but I think he's getting beat a lot too. I'm a little bit concerned. I'm not ready. I mean, he's a young player. He'll get better, I'm sure, but I'm glad you said what I've kind of observed, which is I don't know that he has had particularly a good season so far. Maybe that's too strong. Maybe he's been good or okay or acceptable, but he hasn't had the kind of season that you kind of expected from him. And I look at tonight, I'll tell you the one guy that seems like he's playing really well for them because he seems to be a guy who is in on a lot of plays, and that is Deshaun Elliott. Do you like him? I think he's played pretty well. I think he's a guy that's made some big plays for them.
Yeah, I think he has been a very solid player. Certainly, you're seeing why he's sometimes been around the ball more than Minkah has. And I see people in the comments defending Minkah. It's an endless debate of I'm not saying Minkah Fitzpatrick's a bad player. I think he does a lot of good things. In this defense, it's when you're paying a guy $20 million to play safety, you got to be special, Paul. And I just don't see Minkah Fitzpatrick being special. Right. I see him being a decent safety, and it takes away the middle of the field. Okay, is that worth $20 million? I think that's the bigger question than is Minkah Fitzpatrick a solid player. I certainly think he's a good player. I think you're paying him to be a great player, and we haven't seen that version of him in a while. With regard to Joey Porter, look, the knock on him in the whole draft process and his career at Penn State that I followed closely was not a guy who's going to make a ton of plays on the ball. He's going to rely on being that true shutdown guy that takes away the number one receiver, takes away half of the field. And if he's not that guy, Paul, it's hard for him to make up for it in a given game. He's not the guy who's going to pick off a pass. He's not the pick six type of cornerback. And so if he's getting picked on by Jerry Jeudy or someone else, that's where it gets dicey. And so I still like him as a player. I think the Steelers are I think that was a good pick by them. I think he shored up an area of need in a big way.
Right.
But I think he's still a ways away from the way people talked about him in the preseason as a true shutdown number one. I think he has not proven that quite yet. Paul, I want to ask a couple questions just about the setting tonight. Obviously, a massive snow game. I think we knew there might be some flurries out there, but I don't think anyone expected any lake effect dumping on that. What do they call it now? Huntington Bank Stadium.
Yeah.
Will you miss games like tonight when all four of the teams in this division are playing in domes? Because this is my big conspiracy theory. It is probably going to happen within 10 years because all of these sports owners want to host Final Fours and college conference championship games, and you can't do that at Acrisure Stadium and Huntington Bank Stadium.
And I'll tell you the other thing is that was a huge crowd at that game. Mm-hmm. But a lot of owners are starting to believe that, the younger generation of new fans coming up and, whatever, they don't want to sit out in weather like that. And they don't want to, they don't want to be outside in weather like that for a game. And so that's why there's domes, that have popped up all across the Midwest. It sounds like the Browns are going to build a dome and build one that's not downtown. That's the other part of it. It's not even downtown. I don't like that at all. But it's going to be real interesting to see how that all unfolds. But to your point, okay, I grew up on Brown Steelers. I was talking about this in the chat. I mean, I remember games like this with Brian Sipe and with, Vinny Testaverde and with, all those years, the Steelers and the Browns playing in snow and bad weather and mud and all the other stuff. I think that's AFC North football, and I think it's a shame that someone wants to take it away. Again, I'm not trying to wax poetic and be nostalgic and all that other stuff, but let's face it, there was something kind of fun about watching that game tonight. Because
that was awesome. I know Steelers fans are bitter because you lose the game, but it was visually beautiful. I was watching the game on the local feed. And then I don't know why on the WPXI feed, for whatever reason, my cable was, not great tonight. So I switched over to the Amazon, and the way it popped on screen was gorgeous. It's just, I know a lot of people in the comments are like, man, there's never going to be a dome in Pittsburgh. I like to tell this story, Paul. Indulge me for a minute here. I wrote a story a few years ago for the Post-Gazette where I said, could Pittsburgh ever host a bowl game now that they're, moving into more cold weather stadiums?
Right.
Like Yankee Stadium, Wrigley Field was having one. I think Fenway Park still has one. I said, could Pittsburgh host a college football bowl game? And I called up the Steelers. I said, do you have any interest in that? And the Steelers told me they would have to have major renovations to Acrisure Stadium in order to be able to host a college football bowl game, which, let's be honest, Pittsburgh's not getting a marquee bowl game here.
Right.
You're talking about like a couple of MAC schools in the Permani Brothers, Sandwich Bowl, if that ever happened in Pittsburgh. And the Steelers told me, no, you can't do it. We need major renovations. We need more investment from the Sports and Exhibition Authority. I called the Pirates. I said, would you guys like to host a college bowl game? And the Pirates said, absolutely. We'll do it for it. So if that tells you how the Steelers feel about their stadium, if it doesn't tell you how they feel about the stadium, I don't think anything will. Paul, I also wanted to ask this. What did you think of the digital numbers that were on the sideline in this one?
You know what? It kind of helped. I didn't hate it. I thought it kind of helped, to be honest. And what was interesting was how often there was a few times when the line was a little bit off the actual yard line. You know what I mean? And the numbers were a little bit off. But I thought it was good. It was pretty good.
Also want to ask this, Paul, just to wrap up the show here. I mean, what's your perception of where the season goes from here? You and I have sat on your live show that you do during the week and these post-game streams and talked about, these two games against the Browns as the two layups that were remaining. You don't get this one. We were talking about number one seed potential last week because of that Chiefs loss to the Bills, which gave you a path to that number one seed. It feels difficult now. How does this change your outlook for this team? Or is it just an ugly Thursday night game? They get 10 days to rest up, prepare. Do you think this is more of a blip or a sign of bigger issues?
No, I think it's a blip. I mean, they played poorly tonight. They did everything wrong. They're coming off a physical, emotional game with the Ravens, 4 days ago. I wouldn't go too crazy, one way or the other, trying to read into anything other than they just didn't play very well. And if you look down the schedule, I would think they will, probably split with the Bengals and then probably lose, might even lose 2 out of 3 of the Eagles, Ravens, and Chiefs. Even if they lose all 3 of those games, I mean, we're talking about basically them having 6 losses or, whatever. So, they're going to make the playoffs. They're probably going to win the AFC North. And you look back on it, you say they just really, really played poorly tonight. So, sour it off and forget about it and move on.
Yeah, I'm not overreacting to this one in the big picture. Apart from the finishing drives, issue, I especially in that first half, I think they did a better job of that in the second half. But that is, for these next 10 days, we're still going to be talking about the red zone a lot, and I think that's the one, big concern that I have about their outlook moving forward. But Paul, you will be back tomorrow on your live show around 5 p.m. So any second day thoughts Paul has about this game, you can check out then. I will be back on the North Shore Drive podcast in for Christopher Carter sometime around the afternoon. Brian Bacco is going to have to drive back from Cleveland. So if you're not already, subscribe to the channel. Plenty more great content coming your way. We're also going to have Jerry Dulac and Ray Fittipaldo. I don't know if they'll be on the field tonight, Paul, because it's pretty cold and wet down there. But they will give their thoughts as well from Huntington Bank Stadium. So subscribe to the channel. If you enjoyed the stream, like it, hit that like button, help us out in the YouTube algorithm. We always appreciate that. And otherwise, we will talk to you after Thanksgiving, everyone. Have a great holiday.
All right. We'll see you.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.